All right, we need to settle it once and for all. How is this Pokemon's name pronounced? I have always said Mismagius, and the Pokedex says...
Mismagius, the magical Pokemon.
Okay, so I was wrong. I guess it's Mismagius. I'm gonna mess this up multiple times during the video. I just know that I am, so please forgive me when I do. By the way, I think Mismagius also makes sense because it's kind of like a mage. After all, it's based on a witch. But the fact that it's the magical Pokemon, I think that does cement the fact that it's supposed to be pronounced Mismagius. I've also seen some comments in the past where people have said that it's based on a magpie, and I just don't see that. I don't think so. I think it's because it's the magical Pokemon. Anyway, today we're going to beat Pokemon HeartGold, starting as Misdreavus and eventually evolving into Mismagius. I almost said it there. I caught myself right at the last minute. Anyways, let's check out, when did Game Freak give us the ability to evolve our Misdreavus into Mismagius? We need to access a Dusk Stone in order to do that. We previously played Togekiss, and getting the Shiny Stone took us all the way until after the Cantonian gym leaders were deleted, when we got access to Rock Climb. I want to show you the raw footage of me searching this up on Bulbapedia so you can see my initial reaction. Okay, Mismagius, let's see how Misdreavus evolves in Generation 4. Well, it evolves to Mismagius from a Dusk Stone, and let's see how we acquire the Dusk Stone in Pokemon HeartGold. Yeah, we get it in the Cerulean Cave. I can't believe this is what Game Freak did to all of these evolutions. There are some other methods here, so we could do the bug catching contest, but no, that's only after the National Pokedex. And we could do the Pokeathlon Dome, but I believe that's only available after Lance, and you need 3,000 points. So we could also get it from Route 17, but that's in Kanto. Yeah, why did Game Freak do this? It feels like what they did in Fire Red by including a mechanic where it just stops your Pokemon from evolving if those Pokemon couldn't evolve in Generation 1. And then in Generation 4, when they made the next remake, they didn't include that mechanic, which was very frustrating, but instead they just took away all of the items that allow you to evolve these Pokemon. Why are they so against players playing with the new species? I think it makes the game more interesting to have new Pokemon in it. Anyways, let's get back to playing with Misdreavus because it's gonna be a while until we evolve. I think you can tell that I recorded that clip before I looked up the pronunciation. Whoops. Okay, so for base stats, Misdreavus has 60 HP, attack, and defense, 85 speed, special attack, and special defense. It's one of these Pokemon that's kind of beautifully balanced. It's a special attacker and special defender. It's also quite fast, and it doesn't really like to use physical things, although the difference between its special attack and its physical attack is not so outrageous that using physical moves doesn't make any sense at all. It has Levitate as an ability, so ground types are essentially useless against us. Also, even though Misdreavus only has one ability, the AI does not know that that's the case, so you will see some instances of Pokemon using ground type moves against Misdreavus, which gives me free turns throughout this run. Now, things start to go really downhill when we look at its level up learn set. It starts with Growl, Psywave, and Spite. Spite is accurate here because Psywave is one of the worst moves in the game. I hate this thing so much. 80% accuracy, and it deals damage in such a trash way. Between 1 damage and 1.5 times the user's level in damage. So my maximum damage at the beginning of the game, since everything rounds down in Pokemon games, is 7, and my lowest damage is 1. Well, I could just miss, so my lowest damage is 0. I'm gonna have to use this move until level 10, which isn't too far away since Misdreavus has the fast growth rate. That said, then it learns Astonish, which doesn't deal damage to the plentiful normal types in the early game, meaning I'm still gonna have to rely on Psywave. Beyond that, it gets Confusion at level 14, Mean Look at 19, and then finally Psybeam at level 23. In Johto games, this is typically the best Psychic type move that most Pokemon have available to them, because the Psychic TM is all the way in Kanto after the first round of the league. Beyond that, through level up, it gets Pain Split, Payback, Shadow Ball, Perish Song, Grudge, and Power Gem at level 50. I do think this special Rock type move is going to have a niche for today's playthrough. Through TM and HM, Misdreavus gets access to a bunch of Electric type moves for coverage. Notably among these is Thunderbolt, which is accessible through the game corner, and Charge Beam, which you can get through the little raffle desk in the department store in Goldenrod City. So both of those moves come as soon as I beat Bugsy. But the early game is going to be where this Pokemon really struggles. It's definitely going to be slow going because of Psywave. At least unlike Togepi, I'm not having to rely on Struggle to get through the Pokemon here. I just have to go back to the Pokemon Center multiple times because Psywave also only has 15 PP, and with a 20% chance to miss, I just don't want to get into the situation where where I have to use Struggle to knock out one Pokemon, Growl has so much PP that it prevents that kind of strategy from being time efficient. I want to take some time here to compliment the back sprite. Misdreavus looks so cool. I love the darker coloration that they gave it. It's essentially like we're seeing Misdreavus from the kind of shadowed part of its body, and it makes it look really dark and intimidating, especially with its little golden color eye. Yeah, this has got to be one of the best back sprites in the game, and I'm going to be looking at it for a long time, so I guess that's a good thing. On the routes leading up to Violet City, I fight all of the optional trainers to get access to Astonish as soon as possible. Sprout Tower is mandatory in Pokemon HeartGold, and I don't think it makes sense to try to go through that area using Psywave. Backtracking costs a lot of time. Also, unlike in Generation 2, you can't go to the Pokemon Mart and purchase escape ropes to quickly get back to the Pokemon Center, so having Astonish lets Misdreavus make it through the Bellsprouts more efficiently. Beating all of them gets Misdreavus up to level 14, and then I head into the gym. Normally I talk about Birdkeeper Abe here, but I'm going to talk about Birdkeeper Rod instead. He has 2 Pidgey, and this is a sign of what's to come against Falkner. Both of them know 2 moves, Tackle and Sand Attack. Because Misdreavus is a ghost type, the AI knows that it can't use Tackle, so these Pokemon are only going to be using Sand Attack. And that's very scary when I have to use Psywave to knock the normal types out. I ended up being surprised with how easily this fight went. I end it with 6 uses of Psywave left, and then I head back to the Pokemon Center to heal up because I need all of the uses of this move to take on Falkner. Just like Birdkeeper Rod, Falkner's Pidgey only has Tackle and Sand Attack, so I'm at the mercy of accuracy mechanics for the remainder of this fight. I tried to play around it by using Confuse Ray on turn 1, hoping that the Pidgey would just hit itself and I could knock it out before it goes for Sand Attack, because the Pidgeotto has Tackle, Roost, and Gust, so it's not going to be lowering my accuracy, and I figured that things would be a lot more consistent if I could make it there with no accuracy drops. That said, I could still lose. Psywave is a really terrible move, but unfortunately for me, the Pidgey hits 3 Sand Attacks before I knock it out and move on to the Pidgeotto. This is obviously a pretty bad position. I went for Confuse Ray, hoping that I could mess the Pidgeotto up, preventing it from using Roost. Then, if I can hit with 1 to 3 Psywaves, I should have been able to knock it out, but unfortunately it does go for Roost. We went back and forth here, and eventually the Pidgeotto just got enough gusts in and Misdreavus faints. That's my first reset. I was hoping for better luck in the second fight, but the Pidgey once again gets 3 Sand Attacks off before I knock it out. So I'm back in the same position I was last time. Although, I'm gonna play this slightly differently. Instead of going for Confuse Ray, I am just spamming Psywave. I was also hoping that the Pidgeotto might just not use Roost, and it doesn't in this case. I hit with 3 Psywaves and Pidgeotto faints. Alright, Falkner, I guess you just threw. I'm surprised that Misdreavus made it through this battle in only 2 attempts. That's a lot better than I thought it was going to be with how inaccurate Psywave is by default and how many Sand Attacks I was getting hit by. Still though, I have a lot to say about this move because we're not done using it. For example, on my way south towards Union Cave, I'm going to fight a bunch of the trainers. This is just so that I get Misdreavus to the highest possible level before I reach Azalea Town. Typically in Johto playthroughs, Azalea Town is one of the most difficult areas in the game. Bugsy is a very strong gym leader, and the rivals team is typically quite difficult to manage. It's usually the hardest rival battle in the entire game. I also have to be careful about my Psywave usage because I can't let the PP drop too low. So before I reach Union Cave, I intentionally heal in the Pokemon Center so that I have as many Psywave uses as possible. Now, just south of this building, there is a bird keeper. His name's Peter, and he has 3 flying Pokemon. I figured that I could beat him with maxed out Psywave PP. The problem is, his first Pidgey once again has Tackle and Sand Attack, so it's able to lower my accuracy, this time by only 1 stage. Then he sends in his Spearow, but I'm missing so much, and by the time the 3rd Pidgey comes in, I run out of Psywave uses. Maybe I shouldn't have fought him? I didn't save before this fight, so I'm gonna have to try to win with Confuse Ray to knock out the Pidgey, but I am missing too much because my accuracy has been dropped all the way to -6. Because of this, I have to spam out all of the PP of Spite first, depleting some of Pidgey's PP along the way, and then Astonish, hopefully getting to Struggle to knock the Pidgey out. Ideally, the Pidgey gets to Struggle before Misdreavus, then it would knock itself out with recoil damage, since in this game, Struggle deals 25% damage of the user's health in recoil every turn. And I don't think this level 6 Pidgey is going to be able to knock out my level 17 Misdreavus. And and I was right. The Pidgey runs out of moves, Misdreavus also runs out of moves, and this fight ends after a very long time with the struggle fest. Just so everyone knows, if I had saved before him, I could have reset, and I think it would have taken less time to get back into the game and fight him again, potentially beating him with better Psywave luck the second time around. The only downside doing it that way is that I could have once again got unlucky with sand attacks and then had to knock his Pokemon out using struggle. If that took place, then the reset obviously would have just been wasted time. Since this is my first attempt series in Pokemon HeartGold, I'll just reflect here on what I might do the second time around with Misdreavus when I come back and replay this line. Honestly, I think that just skipping this trainer would be the best choice. There's no possibility for any awful scenarios, and the experience I'm gaining from 3-week flying type Pokemon is not so substantial that I should have fought him. Throughout Union Cave, I continue battling optional trainers to gain as much experience as possible. Luckily in here, all of the Pokemon can be hit by Astonish, so I don't have PP problems. Inside Slowpoke, well, there are some normal types, so I get forced back to the Pokemon Center once before completing this area. I have to say, this is kind of annoying for Misdreavus, but Psywave is not nearly as bad as I was remembering it being. When I played Misdreavus in Gen 2, I had an absolutely miserable time with the early sections of the game, and it's not really feeling that bad today. But Bugsy's next, and as I've said before, he's a pretty good gym leader in Pokemon HeartGold, so let's see how Misdreavus does here. No, I just looked it up. Okay, sorry, before the battle starts, I just realized that I'm pronouncing Misdreavus wrong. It's Misdreavus. The Pokedex then goes on to say that it's mischievous, so like mischievous? That's why I've said it that way.
Misdreavus, the Screech Pokemon. Misdreavus loves being mischievous by pulling people's hair and shocking them.
But Misdreavus? Okay, fine. Whatever. Alright, now let's face Bugsy. This fight took a little bit of trial and error for me to figure out. Initially, I thought that going for Confuse Ray and then Astonish, since Misdreavus is faster than the Scyther, I thought I could flinch it over and over again, potentially preventing it from attack with the combination of the status condition. This doesn't really work out. I'm not doing that much damage. Scyther U-turns out, Kakuna comes in, poisons Misdreavus with Poison Sting, then Scyther comes back in, and I'm just not going to be able to survive long enough. Plus, Bugsy has a Super Potion, so he's able to heal his lead and ace. I tried the same strategy again, and you're probably wondering why I'm not using a Pecha Berry. Well, the answer is I skipped the Ruins of Alph section of the game, and I did not go into the little hidden chamber to pick one up earlier in the playthrough. I actually didn't anticipate that Misdreavus was going to have problems here. I was thinking that I might have trained to a higher level, maybe 23, and got access to Psybeam before this fight, but the fast growth rate isn't the fastest in the early game. It's not like fluctuating or medium slow growth rates, which probably would have been level 23 by this point in the game. So without a Pecha Berry, I once again get poisoned by the Kakuna, and this gives me a second reset to Bugsy. In the third fight against him, I decided to change up my strategy, and I far prefer this choice over using Confuse Ray and Astonish. I am using Psywave. It's an annoying move, but in this case, it can deal massive damage to the Scyther. It's also dealing much more damage to the Kakuna, so I can knock that Pokemon out quicker and avoid Poison Sting on some turns. Bugsy still heals it, but I'd rather him heal the Kakuna than the Scyther, so when it comes back in, it's at low health and I can easily finish it off. From there, there's only Metapod, but its only move is Tackle, so it literally can't deal damage to a Ghost type. Rival 2. I think I should have just gone for Astonish and one-shot the Ghastly. Instead I went for Confuse Ray, trying to prevent it from using Curse in case Astonish was not going to one-hit, but Ghastly has low physical defense and I'm over-leveled at this point, so yeah, obviously Astonish one-hits, that was the better choice. Luckily I didn't get cursed. Zubat's next. It takes an annoying 3 turns to finish. Unfortunately, I did get confused along the way before the Bayleaf comes out. Misdreavus damages itself on turn 1, then I snap out of confusion, confuse the Bayleaf because it's set up with Reflect, and so I guess I have to use Psywave again. This is going to be the last time I use Psywave, and normally I would say good riddance at this point, but you know, it really didn't treat me that badly today. It comes through for me one final time, giving me massive damage against the Bayleaf and Misdreavus 2 shots. On the other side of the forest, I fight one optional trainer, Picnic Regina. Defeating her Pokemon allows Misdreavus to level up to 23, where I teach it Psybeam in the place of Psywave. In Goldenrod Goldenrod City, I immediately stop by the department store because I want to go to the raffle desk and pick up a TM here, which is Charge Beam. By the way, there are 3 places to get this in Pokemon HeartGold. One is here, one is in Olivine City, and then later in Kanto, once you fix the power plant, the manager also gives you this TM. If you're playing vanilla HeartGold, this is available on Wednesday, and you have to get the first prize. In my playthroughs, I have eliminated this RNG, so I can just get any item I want from this raffle desk whenever I would want. This also applies to Voltorb Flip, which I allow myself to solve by default. If you want to check out my patch for HeartGold so that you can play the game in the same way with my overlay, then check out the Discord link in the description because all of my resources have been released there. So Charge Beam. This move is really good in HeartGold. Number 1, because it is available in Goldenrod City early on into the playthrough. Number 2, it has 90% accuracy, which isn't great, but its secondary effect is a 70% chance to raise special attack. I play Voltorb Flip so that I can earn myself the Thunderbolt TM, which I teach to Misdreavus now. I want to make one note here, which is I am holding on to Confuse Ray on my set because Misdreavus doesn't really have a good answer for Jasmine, and because of that, I'm thinking that maybe Confusion down the line will be the solution to her. For now though, this move is not going to be useful. I'm pretty sure Charge Beam plus Thunderbolt will be enough to take on Whitney. She leads with Clefairy. I go for Charge Beam on turn 1. It boosts my special attack, which is perfect. Turn 2, it doesn't knock out the Clefairy, which is an advantage because I can use Charge Beam for a 3rd time in a row, boosting my special attack to +3, and then I knock out the Clefairy, boosting to +4 before Miltank comes in. Alright Whitney, you're gonna get destroyed. I go for Thunderbolt against her ace and easily one-shot. Sudowoodo isn't an issue. The mandatory double battle before Ecruteak City is really easy because these Pokemon have normal type moves, and following that I head straight to the Burn Tower to face the rival. If I wasn't thinking about Jasmine and trying to hold on to Confuse Ray, at this point in the run I would have taught Substitute in its place. By doing that, I could set it up at the beginning of this fight, preventing the Ghastly from going for Curse and improving my defense for later on. Without my defense in place, I just knock the Ghastly out using Psybeam and move on to the Zubat. This is where I get a little bit unlucky. I miss my first Charge Beam. Zubat confuses Misdreavus and it hits itself, so I take some damage before I knock it out and move on to the Bayleaf. Confusion is still active here. Misdreavus hits itself, Bayleaf poisons me, and once again this status condition is going to be my undoing. While I am able to knock out his ace, Magnemite is next, and I don't have moves that are good against steel types. This is why I'm scared of Jasmine. Thunderbolt is my best bet here. Unfortunately, Charge Beam did not raise my special attack, so with my special attack unmodified, this is how much damage the electric move does to the electric steel type. More than half, but not enough to get the knockout, so that's it, one reset here. Second time around, I play risky. I use Charge Beam on the Ghastly to 2-shot. I get +1 here and it doesn't use Curse, so I purely lucked out. I also try Charge Beam on the Zubat, but I don't get to +2. Still, I'm in a much better position now. I can use Psybeam, knock out the Bayleaf. Even though I get poisoned, I move on to the Magnemite in a slightly better position. I have roughly half health. Thunderbolt still can't one-shot with +1, but Magnemite can't do enough damage, and even with the poison damage stacking up, I'm still able to survive and defeat the rival. Okay, so the Ghost-type gym. I am going to whinge about the fact that there is no Misdreavus in this gym. How did the developers think that that was a good idea? Yeah, we made a new region. We also introduced a cool new Ghost-type, but no, we are not going to give any trainers this Ghost-type in the entire game. What were they thinking? It also bothers me that they had a chance to fix a bunch of the mistakes from Generation 2 when they made HeartGold and Soul Silver, and largely they just decided to double down on everything that they did in the previous generations. The bad level curve still exists, and they also didn't change the gym leader teams to include Johto Pokemon. Morty's final Haunter could have been a Misdreavus. That would have been so cool. Anyways, this gym is essentially a poison type gym, so Psybeam is super effective against all of these Pokemon, and because of that, I assume that Morty is going to be pretty simple. His Gengar has 63 speed, so I'm going to move first against all of his Pokemon. I one-shot the Ghastly and the Haunter. He sends in Gengar next. I'm not able to one-shot, but then it just goes for Mean Look, and with a second Psybeam, it faints. Morty was easy as expected. Following this gym win, I earned myself the Shadow Ball TM, and I could teach this right away, but I'm deciding not to because I'm holding on to Confuse Ray. I'll come back and reflect on this decision later on. For now, I head south of Ecruteak City and pick up the Magnet to boost the power of both Charge Beam and Thunderbolt by 20%. The next section of the game usually involves some kind of choice. Do I want to go to Chuck next, or do I want to fight Pryce? In this case, Chuck just makes more sense because I can get access to Fly after beating him to make navigating the overworld faster, and as a ghost type, I assume that the fighting types are not going to cause any issues. That said, Pryce should also be very easy since he has a bunch of water types on his team. But saying that, I'm also realizing that Chuck has a water type on his team, so an electric type move in this section of the game is actually really potent. Chuck leads with Primeape, I knock it out with 2 uses of Psybeam, Poliwrath comes in, Thunderbolt's not able to one-shot, but Surf does almost no damage, and I 2-hit. Okay, let's come back and reflect on the fact that I'm holding on to Confuse Ray. At this point, I don't want to give up Psybeam because it will be very useful against Koga and Bruno during the Elite Four. Thunderbolt is my go-to move, and Charge Beam has great synergy with my other 2 attacks. That said, Charge Beam also has great synergy with Shadow Ball because it is a special move starting in Generation 4. Over the previous section of the game, I didn't really need Shadow Ball for increased damage, but I was starting to realize that all of my moves are resisted by Jasmine's Pokemon, and I think that Shadow Ball is actually going to be my best bet against her. So I decided to let go of Confuse Ray and teach Shadow Ball in its place. If I went back and did this playthrough again, I would obviously teach Shadow Ball right after beating Morty. It just makes sense to have it at that point in the playthrough. The Rocket plotline is all really quick, and then I take on Pryce. In this case, Shadow Ball gives me an advantage because after I've boosted myself, he sends in Piloswine second. I think it's because I'm using a bunch of electric moves against the Seal. I can just use Shadow Ball here, knock it out in 2 turns, Dugong is last, and Thunderbolt one-shots. Okay, so the easy stuff is done. Now we have to take on Jasmine. There is no way to progress with the game other than fighting her now. The only other choices are using rare candies to boost my Pokemon's level to beat Jasmine more easily, or fighting wild Pokemon or trainers that I've skipped to level up more. I want to avoid that if possible, and I think there is a way to beat Jasmine at level 41. I head back to the Goldenrod City department store because I hadn't thought of this strategy earlier. I can go to the raffle desk again and grab myself a Cherry Berry. This way I can play around her Magnemites using Thunder Wave on turn 1. Okay, so Charge Beam right away to hopefully boost special attack, and what I'm praying for is that I have enough damage to then knock out both Magnemites in a single hit, and hopefully I'll be 2 or 3-shotting the Steelix. Magnemite number 1 falls to my follow-up Shadow Ball, she sends in her second Magnemite, I roll Shadow Ball again, and it just barely doesn't do enough damage. Alright, because of that, I get paralyzed by Thunder Wave, and this fight's not looking too good anymore. She uses her Hyper Potion healing the Magnemite, I roll Shadow Ball again, Paralysis doesn't prevent my attack, and this time I get better damage, knocking out her Steel type in a single hit. So I've made it to the Steelix. Let's see how much damage Shadow Ball does here. Now, I do want to mention the fact that Ghost type moves are resisted by Steel types in Generation 4, so Shadow Ball's effective power is only 60. It does almost half damage to the Steelix, and then Jasmine's Ace misses an Iron Tail. Alright, things are going my way. Not on the next turn though, Paralysis activates, I miss my attack, but Steelix only sets up Sandstorm. Iron Tail hits, doing roughly 1/3 in damage. Shadow Ball fails to get the knockout. Steelix recovers health using its Citrus Berry. Misdreavus takes damage from Sandstorm. Steelix follows up with another Iron Tail, this one dropping my defense stat, and Paralysis activates, preventing my attack. Okay, I think I have lost now, but Steelix, instead of choosing Iron Tail, which would have done more damage, picks Rock Throw. This is because it's seeing that it can get the knockout with both of the moves, but it rolls worse damage with Rock Throw, and Misdreavus survives with 1 hit point. Paralysis, please don't ruin this for me. It doesn't. Shadow Ball hits and Steelix faints. Okay, we beat Jasmine on our first attempt. I wasn't expecting that. In my first playthroughs, I'm not allowing myself to use Hidden Power because I think it lets me explore what the Pokemon naturally has available to them just a little bit better. It's overall more interesting that way, I think. If I played this run again, I would definitely use Hidden Power Fire though, just to make Jasmine trivial. Okay, Radio Tower and Petrol. Here I want to talk about an item that I haven't been using very much during this series. It's the Metronome. This item boosts the power of moves whenever that move is used consecutively, and for each previous turn, it boosts it by an additional 10%. 50%, up to a maximum increase of 100%, which occurs when the move has been used 11 times or more in a row. Unfortunately, I have yet to track down the RAM location where the metronome counter is stored, so I can't display the increasing power for my move with each subsequent use, so you'll just have to remember that this is stacking up damage in the back end. This item is actually amazing against Petrol. If I wasn't able to one-shot right from the beginning, it would stack up damage and then give me one-shots later into the fight when my Pokemon could have a status condition like Poison or potentially have its accuracy dropped by a move like Smokescreen. I think for other species, this is going to be a lot more relevant during this fight. For Misdreavus, I think the only thing that might have changed here is that I get a one-shot on the Weezing, which maybe would have survived if I didn't have the boosts. The rival in the underground is next. He leads with Golbat, which is the perfect opportunity for me to set up with Charge Beam. Unfortunately, the Golbat knows Astonish and Bite, two super effective moves, and it confuses me turn 1. Then does a lot of damage, and before I knock it out, it brings Misdreavus down to 20 hit points. Okay, I'm not liking my chances here. Sneasel comes in next. I use Thunderbolt, which one-shots. I did get to +2 with Charge Beam on the Golbat, so that's at least working in my favor. Shadow Ball is super effective against the Haunter, which it one-hits, and then it's neutral against the Meganium. I thought it might survive, but no, +2 is enough. So what about the Steel-type Magnemite? Well, Shadow Ball does enough damage and I just barely make it through the rival. Another close fight. At the end of the Rocket plot line, I have to face some dark types, Houndour and Houndoom. The fact that the Houndour comes in first gives me time to use Charge Beam, but I decided not to, just going for Thunderbolt for the one-shot. Houndoom is still a two-shot using Thunderbolt, but it does massive damage using Bite. Luckily, it's not faster, so I am able to knock it out and move on to the Coughing, which is an easy one-shot. The Misdreavus-line is missing some key coverage. It doesn't have an Ice type move, so I lack super effective damage against Dragon type Pokemon. I think the fact that Clair leads with Gyarados is going to give me a pretty easy win against her since I have Charge Beam, but then for Lance, even with Charge Beam, I'm not sure that his leading with a Gyarados is going to give me the same success. For that reason, I think that Power Gem is going to be the solution to a bunch of his flying type Pokemon, and that does mean that I need to give up one of my current moves. If I had kept Confuse Ray to defeat Jasmine, then I would be able to replace it with the Rock type move now, but with Shadow Ball, it makes the choice a little bit more complicated. I could replace Charge Beam because I can always get this back with another TM whenever I want, but I think having access to Charge Beam for every fight makes more sense. So the move that I'm going to have to give up will be Psybeam, which means I'm not going to fare quite as well against Koga or Bruno during the league. But we'll talk about them later. For now, let's take on Clair. Gyarados is first. I don't care about Intimidate. I'm setting up Charge Beam, unfortunately not boosting my special attack on turn 1, but when I get the knockout on turn 2, because Gyarados didn't go down to a single hit, I do get the +1 bonus. This levels Misdreavus to 50, where it can learn Power Gem, which I put in the place of Psybeam. Next, Dragonair comes in. I'm going to have to use Shadow Ball here, and I'm able to one-shot both of them, moving on to the Kingdra. So I should have enough damage to two-shot here, and yes, Shadow Ball is going to pull that off. But will I survive the Hydro Pump? And the answer is yeah, Misdreavus just kind of shrugs it off, survives on orange health, and finishes Clair. I'm not gonna lie, when I sat down to do this playthrough, I was a little bit worried about it. I didn't think it was gonna be that smooth, especially because of the early game with Psywave, but I've been really impressed up until this point. In most HeartGold playthroughs, I have many more resets and blackouts by this point in the game, but Misdreavus only has 4, and unlike other species, I haven't even been able to evolve yet. That said, things do get a bit bumpy here. The Kimono girls are next, and I don't stack up well against them. The first one has Umbreon, which is super effective, then it's Espeon, and while I can one-shot this one, I'm on low health, and then I have to two-shot the Flareon, taking damage from it, leaving Misdreavus with only 6 hit points by the time I'm facing Jolteon. It's not faster, but I can't one-shot, so I black out here. I have found in these solo challenges that it makes way more sense to repeatedly black out the Kimono girls, taking experience from all of the battles, rather than resetting and just losing all of that experience. While I can't make progress against them this way, since you do need to fight all 5 in sequence, I can at least gain levels and work slowly towards beating them. In the end, I just luck through these fights. The Flareon, instead of attacking, uses Will-O-Wisp, which will do damage on every turn, but it's less upfront damage than it going for Fire Blast. After that, Jolteon goes for Double Team instead of attacking, letting me make it to the Vaporeon, which I have super effective damage in the form of Thunderbolt. It's still bulky enough to tank one of these hits, but it's not capable of doing enough damage. Alright, let's talk about a TM that I've never used in HeartGold before. If you smash these 3 rocks right before fighting the rival in Victory Road, you can pick up the TM for Dark Pulse. It's a special move that has 80 base power, and it also has a 20% chance to flinch the enemy. It could be very useful for some Pokemon against Will, who's coming up next, but with Shadow Ball, it's just not good coverage for a Ghost type. I picked it up in case I would need it later on, but in the end, this is going to go unused. The rival leads with Sneasel. It actually has a physical Dark move, so it can do okay damage. That said, I get 2 boosts with Charge Beam, knocking it out in 2 turns. Then Shadow Ball 1-hits Haunter, Thunderbolt 1-hits Golbat. I move on to the Magneton next, and surprisingly, Shadow Ball is able to one-shot. Okay, this is a clean sweep after that early setup. Time for the Elite Four. Will is first. I'm just going to spam Shadow Ball here, even though I could set up with Charge Beam against his Flying Xatu at the beginning of the fight. Still, I don't think that makes sense because Shadow Ball has such ridiculous damage against all of his Psychic types. I one-shot even the Executor and the Slowbro. Using Charge Beam only would have made this battle more unpredictable. Okay, let's talk about Psybeam as we fight Koga. He's got Poison types, right? So Psybeam is super effective. But with base 65 power, its super effective power is only going to be 130, whereas Power Jam is going to be doing more to his bug types like Ariados and Venomoth. And then Shadow Ball only has 10 less effective power when used against Pokemon that it's hitting neutrally. But I have Thunderbolt for super effective damage against the Crobat anyway. So not having Psybeam here is not really that huge of a deal. Okay, Bruno. Not having Psybeam here is also not a huge deal. I really want you to observe the fact that the Hitmontop can do absolutely nothing. It has counter Quick Attack, Dig, and Triple Kick, and of all of these moves, it is selecting Dig on every turn despite the fact that I have Levitate. This is hilarious to watch Bruno do over and over and over again. I should have played this a little bit more intelligently, not using Charge Beam on every turn when I wasn't going to hit the Hitmontop. In the end, I'm only able to get set up to +1, but this ends up just being enough. From there, Shadow Ball gets a clean sweep against all of his Pokemon until the Machamp, which does survive, but its Rock Slide doesn't do much damage, and I 2-shot. Theoretically, Karen should be very difficult for Misdreavus. Charge Beam does almost nothing to the Umbreon, which has ridiculous special defense, but it does boost Misdreavus' special attack. However, then the Umbreon uses Payback and deals massive damage, almost half in one hit. On the next turn, it goes for Confuse Ray, which is annoying. I get one more special attack boost, and I decided to go for Thunderbolt to hopefully knock out the Umbreon as soon as possible. I'm just hoping that +2 is going to be enough. I'm able to secure the knockout, move on to the Murkrow. Luckily, Confusion didn't mess me up. It goes down in one hit. Houndoom comes out. Power Gem is super effective, getting the one-shot. Is this going to be easy? Yeah, it's going to be easy. Gengar is a one-hit with Shadow Ball, leaving only Vileplume, which doesn't even survive. Things have been too easy. Is Lance going to be a problem? Well, he leads with Gyarados, meaning right away we can use Charge Beam. Again, we don't care about Intimidate. That's one of the benefits of playing with a Pokemon that is exclusively a special attacker. Unfortunately for me, Charge Beam isn't cooperating in this case. I only get to +1 once I knock out the Gyarados. It's lucky that I'm not one-shotting, which is actually a reason why being a higher level would make this fight a little bit more challenging. I get more opportunities to stack up my special attack before Lance sends in his second Pokemon. This is also a reason why Charge Beam having 50 base power is an advantage for it as a move. The more I play HeartGold, the more I'm falling in love with this move. Anyway, I move on with +1, and Lance sends in Aerodactyl next. It's faster than me by 4 speed. It goes for Crunch, which is super effective and physical, and Misdreavus faints. Okay, so I started Lance last time at level 60. I used 5 rare candies to go up to level 65 over 2 damage rounding thresholds, and this also gives me enough speed to move first against all of Lance's Pokemon. But it also isn't enough levels to give me the one-shot against the Gyarados with Charge Beam. It puts it in the range where Lance is going to use a full restore, giving me at least one more attack so that I can get to +2 before the Aerodactyl in an ideal circumstance. And that's exactly what happens in this battle. With the outspeed, I can easily one-shot using Charge Beam one more time, getting to +3 before Charizard comes in. Power Gem one-shots with super effective damage. Lance sends in his Ace Dragonite next, and Power Gem finishes it in a single hit. So the level 49 Dragonites are both going to be one-shots as well. The Elite Four and Lance were really easy. and I assume that the Cantonian gym leaders are not going to put up that much of a fight. One possible moveset change that I could make right now is teaching Psychic in the place of a move like Charge Beam or Power Gem, but I think adding Psychic to my set is a little bit premature. All of my current moves have great synergy, and I want to hold on to Power Gem until the second attempt against Lance, because that is one of the most difficult battles in this game. Okay, I don't want to waste time with the Kanto gym leaders. Erica's easy, Sabrina is also really easy, although surprisingly Shadow Ball isn't one-hitting some of her Pokemon. In the end, she's not a problem. Misty, I've got Charge Beam and Thunderbolt, so this one's quick, but Surge ends up causing some problems. This is only because I can't one-shot the Raichu at the beginning of the battle, so it paralyzes Misdreavus, and because of the status condition, I do end up taking one reset here. But in the second fight, the Raichu just goes for double team and I two-shot. Because of that, without the status condition, I'm able to make it through the rest of Surge's Pokemon. There was a little bit of strategy here, which is using Charge Beam against the Electrode, since Electrode is incompetent. That allows me to set up my special attack so that I'm one-hitting more of the Pokemon later into the fight. Shadow Ball and Electric moves solves Brock. Power Gem is great against Blaine, and while I don't have super effective damage for Janine, she leads with Crobat, giving me an opportunity to set up with Charge Beam. We're getting really close to the end of the game. Blue's team has great type diversity, but I don't think it's going to pose that much of a threat. First is Executor. I have super effective damage in the form of Shadow Ball, and I can one-shot, preventing it from going from Trick Room, meaning Misdreavus is going to be faster than all of his Pokemon. Power Gem is able to two-shot the Arcanine, but it does a lot of damage with Flare Blitz before it goes down. I finish it with Charge Beam, hoping to get +1, but I don't. Rhydon's next. Shadow Ball isn't able to knock it out, and Stone Edge brings Misdreavus down to 16 hit points. Without Psychic, I'm not going to one-shot the Machamp, so this is a reset. I previously started the fight at level 74, so I'm going to use Rare Candies now and begin the fight at level 83. Even at the higher level, I wasn't fully confident in my damage ranges here, so I wanted to set up Charge Beam once against the Arcanine, which ends up being my undoing because I just don't get +1 early enough and it attacks with Flare Blitz too many times, securing a critical hit on turn 2. In the third battle, I get my setup with Charge Beam on turn 1 against the Arcanine and then finish it on turn 2. This boost in damage allows me to one-shot the Rhydon, preventing damage from Stone Edge. While I can't one-hit the Machamp, he just heals it once and then I roll better damage, finishing it in a single hit on turn 2. Gyarados is a one-hit, and so is Pidgeot. Okay, are all of you ready to get a little bit frustrated, a little bit angry? Well, I certainly am. Let me explain. By this point in the run, I had spent 2 hours and 10 minutes as a Misdreavus, and things were going pretty well. 11 faults to this point in the game with a first stage Pokemon is just kind of amazing. I had gotten so used to just not thinking about evolving that I completely forgot the fact that I do have access to Cerulean Cave as soon as I beat Blue. Just so everyone knows, this is the only location where I can pick up a Dusk Stone reliably, and I should have gone there right away so that I could have evolved Misdreavus before taking on the Elite Four for round 2. But I completely forgot to do this, and I just went back to the Elite Four and started fighting them. Of course, as a ghost type, Shadow Ball's really good against Will, who is the first member, and by the time I arrived in Koga's chamber and saved, I thought about blacking out and going back to Cerulean Cave and evolving, but then I was like, you know what, Charge Beam is probably just going to be enough here, so I kind of doubled down and tried to make it through him, which proved to be much more difficult than I expected. He leads with Skuntank, and this is a massive problem. It's a dark type, but it also likes to use Toxic, and that seems to be what it's prioritizing on turn 1 against Misdreavus. Also, when it does attack with Sucker Punch, it does a lot of damage. I'm poisoned and taking tons of damage early on into the fight, so I'm not going to be able to win. Now, I credit this second battle here with the fact that I doubled down and tried to beat Koga, because right away it rolls Sucker Punch on turn 1, and I get a +1 boost off of Charge Beam, allowing me to knock it out on turn 2 with Thunderbolt. This looked like a good opportunity for me to sweep the rest of his team and just proceed with the league. I one-shot the Toxicroak, one-shot the Crobat, one-shot the Venomoth, two-shot the Swalot, which ends up being very problematic because it rolls a lucky Sludge Bomb which poisons Misdreavus, and because of that I have another reset. If the Swalot doesn't poison me with Sludge Bomb, I should easily win, right? Skuntank uses Toxic once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, 7 times in a row. All of these are resets. Luckily, they come very fast. I want to mention something that's really unfortunate here. If I had evolved into Mismagius by this point in the run, I would be able to knock out the Swalot in one hit after getting set up to +1, so we would have beat Koga in that previous long battle, and I wouldn't have got stuck here against the Skuntank, resetting over and over again. Eventually I realized that I was being stubborn, but I continued being stubborn in a different way. I decided not to black out and evolve. Instead, I just realized that I can switch up my moveset and beat Koga as a Misdreavus. If I teach Substitute in the place of Shadow Ball, then I can set it up, block Toxic, knock out the Skuntank after getting established with Charge Beam, and then easily sweep the rest of his team. Bruno's next. I don't really care about him because the Hitmontop is very incompetent at the beginning of the battle, so I just set up to +3 with Charge Beam against it and then destroy the rest of his team. You see, this is why I was trying to beat Koga. I wasn't that scared of the remaining Elite Four members. And well, maybe I should have been, because Karen, a Dark-type specialist, is next. Her lead Weavile is doing a lot of damage on turn 1 with Night Slash. It's going to be able to 3-shot me with this move, giving me only 2 turns to set up with Charge Beam before I have to go for a more powerful attack and knock it out. Power Gem is super effective here, so I will be able to 3-shot, and with +1, I am not able to knock out the Spiritomb in a single hit, and it also has priority Sucker Punch, so it can finish Misdreavus if I'm going for an attacking move. I tried just attacking with Power Gem against the Weavile, but this also won't work because then the Spiritomb will survive Thunderbolt, go for Curse, and I'm not going to have enough health to last for the remainder of the fight. I could have set up Substitute there and blocked the Curse, but I thought that it was going to be going for Sucker Punch, so that's why I didn't do that. Anyways, another loss. In the third battle, I arrived at the Spiritomb with higher health, so I thought it was okay if it went for Sucker Punch, but this time around it does not go for Sucker Punch, going for Curse, so even with +1, I have another reset. The solution here ends up being going for Substitute against the Spiritomb because it is probably going to be going for Curse. It does, and I'm able to sweep the rest of her team after that. Okay, Mismagius definitely would have been better on both Koga and Karen, but what about Lance? This fight is a little bit more complicated than the previous ones. I can use Charge Beam here to set up against the Salamence at the beginning of the fight, but problematically it has Shadow Claw, so it can do a lot of damage, and I'm only able to set up on 2 turns. So the maximum special attack boost I can get here is +2. And if the Salamence attacks on 2 turns, then Misdreavus is left with orange health by the time Garchomp comes in second. It sees that it can get the knockout and attacks right away. I should have clued into this a little bit faster, but instead I kept fishing for a +2 bonus on the Salamence so that I could hopefully one-shot the Garchomp. I don't get it in the second fight, so I have another reset, but in the third fight I do, and unfortunately I am not able to one-shot the Garchomp with Shadow Ball at +2. Because of this, it gets me with Outrage once again. I didn't really know what to do here, and I just kept fighting Lance over and over again. Back earlier on into the league, I should have recognized that the sunk cost fallacy was coming into play. I should have just blacked out to Koga, evolved to Mismagius, and then fought the rest of the league. But I slowly made my way through all of these battles with a bunch of resets, accumulating tons of real time. And then, by the time I got here to Lance, I was just like, I have to find a solution with Misdreavus. I'm not gonna black out now, right? Well, it doesn't really seem like there's a solution here since +2 is the best scenario against the Salamence, and then I can't one-shot the Garchomp. But that's forgetting one key factor about Lance's AI. If on turn 1 I use Shadow Ball, I can do massive damage to the Salamence, in this case with a critical hit. Because of that, Lance has to use a full restore, and that gives me 1 turn to attack with Charge Beam to boost my special attack before I can knock out the Salamence. I don't need +2 for the Garchomp. What I need instead is green health. If I'm healthy, then Garchomp is going to set up with Swords Dance on turn 1, and I can knock it out with 2 turns of Shadow Ball. Charizard is third, Power Gem 1 hits, and while Dragonite follows, it doesn't attack because it likes to set up 2 with Safeguard. I can 2-shot using Power Gem, 1-shot the Gyarados, and 2-shot the final Altaria. Honestly, this was bad play. I'm really disappointed in myself that I didn't go back and evolve, but now at long last we are going to do it. By the way, the Dusk Stone is so far into Cerulean Cave. It takes a serious amount of time to just navigate this dungeon and get to it. But finally, at long last, we can evolve our Johto Pokemon into its Generation 4 evolution, Mismagius. For base stats, it now has 60 HP, attack and defense, and 105 speed, special attack, and special defense. While I did make a mistake and I didn't evolve earlier, this kind of feels like how Game Freak would have wanted you to play this scenario. Beat the entire game with Misdreavus, and then for one final battle, you get to use the full evolution. So now, let's take on Red. Pikachu's up first. I wanted to establish Charge Beam here and hopefully tank a Volt Tackle or two. Turns out Volt Tackle is doing way more damage than I was hoping for. It almost one-shots, which leaves me in a bad position for the remainder of the fight. I did get +1 from Charge Beam here, so this is about the best that I could hope for. And then he sends in Snorlax next, which takes 1/3 damage from Thunderbolt. I do paralyze, but Snorlax hits with Blizzard and Mismagius faints. In the second fight, Volt Tackle paralyzes me right away, and that's just not going to work. Also notice that I have changed my move setup now. I've let go of Power Gem. I don't think it's that useful. I was holding onto it for super effective damage against the Charizard, just in case I wasn't doing enough damage with Thunderbolt, but I think I need another way. What I'm going to do is use Attract against the Pikachu so that it doesn't attack me with Volt Tackle, then hopefully set up more than once with Charge Beam before knocking out Red's lead. There is still the possibility to win here if I make it by the Pikachu with only +1. I can use Attract on the Snorlax, potentially stack up more Charge Beams here, or just use the status to knock it out with Thunderbolt. It doesn't work out for me this time. I started resetting quickly whenever the Pikachu would go for Volt Tackle just to save as much time as possible. I want a lucky turn 1 with Attract to start things off on the right foot. And this fight goes very well. I get set up to +2 on the Pikachu and then move on to the Snorlax with full health. However, it hits with Crunch right away. I set up Attract and it does more than half damage to me, which is really bad. Luckily, Attract comes through for me, preventing the Snorlax from attacking again, and I 2-shot using Thunderbolt. Okay, do I have enough damage to one-shot the Charizard? And the answer is yes. Venusaur follows. I have to use Shadow Ball here. I was kind of scared, but then I get a critical hit, one-shotting. Blastoise comes in, super effective damage with Thunderbolt is enough, and that leaves only Lapras. So, Mismagius is able to do it. Despite my mistake earlier on, it clocks in with a time of 2 hours, 36 minutes, and 40 seconds. I had 39 faults consisting of 36 resets and 3 blackouts. It finished the game at level 91 with a game time of 8 hours and 14 minutes. Looking at this result, I was left dumbfounded. When I first sat down to play this Pokemon, I assumed that it was going to be absolutely terrible. And that's saying a lot when I was unevolved for all but one battle in the run. Let's go through a couple other times in the tier list. Mewtwo's result under 1 year ago was 2 hours, 31 minutes, and 46 seconds, with only 13 resets, and its game time was 7 hours and 29 minutes. Then just months after Mewtwo, I played Ambipom and got a time of 2 hours, 37 minutes, and 27 seconds, with 26 resets, 2 blackouts, with a game time of 8 hours and 1 minute. So Mismagius earns itself a placement between Mewtwo and Ambipom in the A tier. I think if I had evolved right after Blue, we would have beat Mewtwo's time. And if we didn't, we would have got really close. Maybe, just maybe, Mismagius would have been the only S tier Pokemon with a result under 2 hours and 30 minutes. That said, this is my first playthrough tier list. There are mistakes with every single one of these species that are ranked currently, so I am going to rank it with the time that I got today. And overall, second place is a pretty good result when you stay as your first stage Pokemon throughout the majority of the playthrough. If we did rank these based on game time, Mismagius would be in 3rd place right now, with Ambipom being slightly faster. These two actually might make a good pairing for a versus video when I start fully evolved. After all, Ambipom does get access to Swords Dance, and it seems like it should be so much faster, but the fact that their results were really close is just baffling to me. Ambipom also evolves earlier into its run. Maybe my HeartGold play has just improved significantly since I played Ambipom? I'm not sure. All of that said, I know that when I come back and play Mewtwo again, it will be much faster. I don't think Mismagius has a chance of beating the legendary even on repeated attempts. Alright, it's October. We got a good result with a ghost type in Pokemon HeartGold. Next time, I'm gonna come back and play a ghost type that I don't think is gonna get very good results. I expect that I am gonna have to go through immense suffering. If you support me through Patreon or YouTube memberships, thank you so much. It means the world to me. Now, if you've made it this far, you're incredible. I'll see you in my next video.